a death benefit and, final expenses, which is true. I mean, life insurance definitely is first and foremost for that, to make sure that you're able to handle your loved one's financial expenses or last expenses, in an appropriate manner without having to borrow from other sources, right? But it actually is a great tool for building wealth as well, because, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, in a little bit, but through the various types of life insurance, there are particular types of life insurance that can provide, living benefits, AKA I can allow you to access some money, part of the policy while you're alive. And then, of course, there's a death benefit side of things where if you pass away, depending on how the policy is structured and the death benefit that you've chosen, it can really have a lasting effect on the generations after you, right?
Life insurance is something that can mistakenly be overlooked as a tool in your wealth creation toolkit. Although it may not always be top of mind, it is something that's critical to building long-term wealth. This week, we sat down with Nicole Simons to talk about this and much more. You're listening to the Black Wealth Effect podcast, where we're all about inspiring the next generation of Black Canadian real estate investors to succeed financially. If you're tuned in, that means you're hungry to take action and build wealth outside of your 9-to-5. We'll be sitting down with Black real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and allies to discuss a diverse set of topics to help you along your investing journey. Let's get started. You're listening to another episode of the Black Wealth Effect podcast. I'm your host, Mario. Please like, subscribe, and comment on this week's episode so we can keep bringing you this great content. Our guest this week is Nicole Simons. Nicole, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mario. Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
And thanks for joining us. I can't wait to delve into our conversation today. We're going to be talking about your career journey, as well as discussing a topic we've actually never covered on the show before, which is life insurance. To start us off, before we delve in, for those listening who may not know a lot about you, can you talk a little bit about your background? So who is Nicole Simons?
Awesome. So hello, everybody. Thanks for listening. My name is Nicole Simons. I am a wealth management advisor with my family business, CPN Financial Services. Yeah, like Mario just mentioned, I mean, life insurance definitely is my bread and butter. I'm a licensed life insurance agent in the provinces of Ontario and recently this year, Alberta as well. And yeah, I mean, working with my family business is awesome. My dad actually started our company over 20 plus years ago. He was a insurance and investment agent himself, and he wanted to create a legacy for his family. So he started his own firm and named it CPN Financial. So CPN actually stands for Colin, Peter, and Nicole. So I am the N in CPN Financial. And it's pretty awesome. We have brokers that work for our company as well. And we're one of the very few Black-owned financial firms in the GTA. We specialize in just making sure our clients have a financial fence built around them. So in the event of premature death, critical illness, disability, that there's very minimal financial impact, to either themselves or their loved one. And we also deal with investments as well. So we help people on the investment side of things and insurance. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Nice. And I love that. Family business. Love the name, the creativity around the name as well. That's fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing that.
No problem. Yeah, it's great. I mean, I often forget that sometimes to mention that to people. People are like, oh, what does CPN stand for? I'm like, oh, yeah, I didn't tell you. So people are always really blown away when I mention that. And, it's just ironic that my siblings and I actually are all in the business because we were all doing different things. Our career paths were all different in the beginning, but eventually we all joined. And yeah, I'm sure my dad couldn't be more proud.
I agree. And so, like on the topic of wealth creation, like when a lot of people think about it, life insurance can tend like not to be kind of at the top of the list. And so can you just talk about like the importance of life insurance as it relates to wealth creation and like any additional insights you could share for our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Mario, when people think of life insurance, they definitely think of like funeral and, a death benefit and, final expenses, which is true. I mean, life insurance definitely is first and foremost for that, to make sure that you're able to handle your loved one's financial expenses or last expenses, in an appropriate manner without having to borrow from other sources, right? But it actually is a great tool for building wealth as well, because, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, in a little bit, but through the various types of life insurance, there are particular types of life insurance that can provide, living benefits, AKA I can allow you to access some money, part of the policy while you're alive. And then, of course, there's a death benefit side of things where if you pass away, depending on how the policy is structured and the death benefit that you've chosen, it can really have a lasting effect on the generations after you, right? It doesn't have to be about just having the minimum amount to make sure that your funeral is covered. What about after that? I mean, usually, especially if you're a family and you have dependents, when you're leaving dependents behind, a spouse behind, you have to remember that for most families, your income was part of that family's net worth. And when you're no longer here, your spouse and your dependents don't have that income anymore. So their standard of living is usually financially compromised. So when you have a life insurance policy, if you pass away prematurely, not only are you able to make sure that your final expenses are taken care of, but you're making sure that there is very little financial impact to your loved ones. You can fund children's education. You can make sure that the mortgage is paid off so that your spouse is not worried about mortgage payments going forward, while they're grieving alone. So there's various things that it can cover, but it can definitely leave wealth behind. It's not just about final expenses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the fact that you mentioned that, right? Like, I think a lot of people, when they think life insurance, they think funeral and like, okay, like how do you cover those expenses? And they don't think beyond that, to your point, like, especially like just based on my experience, like within the Black community, like they don't think beyond that.
Right.
So yeah, so that's great insights for sure. On that note, like when you think about like for someone just getting started or like they've never had life insurance before, I know you touched on it a little bit, but like maybe like can you share like what advice would you give them in terms of getting started, and then maybe build on like what are the different types of life insurance that they should be considering or thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So life insurance, it's not the sexiest topic, of course, but it's definitely something. And you know what, to my surprise, I want to add in that within the past year, I would say since after COVID, I've seen a real influx of a lot of younger people inquiring about life insurance, which is such a drastic change for me because I've been doing this now for about 11 or 12 years. And when I first started, it was very hard for me to, I don't want to use the word convince, but it was very hard for me to get anyone to purchase life insurance that was young, 25 and younger, or someone that didn't have any children, because they were like, well, what do I need that for? I don't have any kids, but we'll talk about that more about why, even if you don't have any kids, it's necessary. But anyway, just to add to that is that for the last year, I've seen such an influx of younger people that are just taking such an interest in just wanting to make sure they have life insurance, whether that be because they want to build wealth and create some type of investment component or savings component, or just wanting to make sure that there's no GoFundMe page being passed around for them. Like everybody has different reasons, but I'm so happy to see so many young people taking an interest. So back to your question, how to get started. So a great way for many people is obviously reaching out to an advisor like myself. So you can find a local, insurance agent or broker in your area. Obviously, a lot of people run to Google first. So a lot of people do their own research even prior to contacting me to look up the different types and learn, the intricacies of the different types of coverage. So you can start online if you want to and look at various insurance companies. But definitely the role of an insurance broker is to listen to your financial needs, take a list of your assets and liabilities and find out what it is that you're trying to protect. Do you want life insurance just because you want your final expenses to be paid off? Do you want life insurance because you have 3 to 4 kids and you want to make sure that they're set financially? Everyone has a different reason, Mario. So there isn't a one cause fits all, right? Like you need so many people that have different reasons for getting it. But once again, just to reiterate, start off with the financial advisor or broker. And then in regard to the different types of coverage, there's two main types of coverage of life insurance. There's term insurance and then there's permanent. So term insurance will cover you for a certain period of time. So you can get a 10-year term, 20-year term, even a 30 or 40-year term. And what that means is that if you pay your monthly premiums, you're able then to pick a life insurance coverage amount. And from there, you make your monthly or annual premiums. And essentially, it's a contract between you and the insurance company where if you pass away, they will pay out a lump sum known as a death benefit to your beneficiaries. So your beneficiary could be your mom, your dad, your wife, your husband. You have free reign to choose that. But essentially, if you pass away, that death benefit that you were approved for will be paid out to your loved ones tax-free. So with the term coverage, once again, if you have a term, if you pass away during that 20-year period, if you have a 20-year term, then the coverage pays out. However, if you outlive your term and you do not pass away, you have to kind of think of it like car insurance. Like we pay for it every single month, but even if we don't get into an accident, we still got to pay, right? So with term insurance, you have a choice to renew your coverage for another 20 years if you want. You can cancel it maybe after 20 years if you no longer need it. But there's a few options that, you can do. But the point is that it's only going to cover you for that period. So if you don't pass away, you don't get your money back or anything like that. That was the contract. You pay for this amount of time. If you pass, we'll pay this amount of money. If you don't pass, you can renew again or you can cancel. So that's essentially high level how term works, right? The other type of coverage is permanent. So permanent, just like it says, it's coverage that you have for life. So you don't have to worry about it expiring. You don't have to worry about it ending in 20 or 30 years. Whether you pass away at age 45 or age 101, it's guaranteed to pay out because unfortunately we do have to pass away at some point. So it's coverage you have for life. So that's how permanent works. And then within the permanent category, there's two types of life insurance, universal life and whole life. Universal life is permanent coverage that, once again, you have for life, but it actually has an investment component. If you're looking for somewhere to actually place money and have money grow tax-free, you can invest within your life insurance policy. And that extra money that you're putting into the policy will grow tax-free and pays out tax-free on death. So, for example, if you have a policy of $100,000 and you were putting in an extra $50 a month. And in year 20, you had $40,000 of, accumulation of investment asset. On death, it'd be the 100,000 plus the investment component that would pay out to your loved ones tax-free. So it's definitely something to consider for people who, for example, max out their TFSAs or, don't care for RRSPs and are looking for somewhere else to grow money tax-free. You can use a universal life policy. Whole life is the other type where essentially whole life is permanent as well. And it also has a cash value component and you're eligible, depending on the type of policy, but you could be eligible to get company dividends. So being a whole life policy owner, the life insurance company can pay you, the contract owner, a dividend, which can be taken in cash. It can be used to buy more coverage, but essentially it helps to grow the policy in value so that upon death, you could potentially have a much higher death benefit than what you signed up for because the dividends have bought you more coverage over the years. So that's just high level. There's tons of intricacies, obviously, that I'm missing, but that's just to give people, an idea that there's term, which is relatively inexpensive. So that's the cheapest one, I guess you could say. And whole life and universal life are permanent coverages that have cash value components that can be accessed while you're alive.
Wow.
That was a mouthful.
That was, wow. No, that was very insightful. Thanks so much. A lot of those insights you just shared, they're news to me. So I appreciate you sharing that with our listeners for sure. On that topic, outside of just not getting insurance, in the first place, what are some common pitfalls that you see or challenges that you see clients experience just going through that process?
Yeah. So, obviously there's the initial resistance, right, that I was mentioned before for younger people and not even younger people, because, it could be young or old, depending on your mindset. And, I would even say a lot of the mentality, the generational mentality that has come before you has a lot to do with how you see life insurance. Maybe you can attest to this yourself, but in the Black community, life insurance is not really a prominent thing. I mean, I feel like it's becoming more and more popular now, but, especially in the West Indian community, a lot of people didn't have it. A lot of our parents did not have that. And that essentially that mindset trickled down to a lot of people where it's like, okay, well, my parents didn't have it, so why do I need it, right? They didn't really see the benefit of it or why. And I find that people tend to be more reactive and proactive, right? So essentially, no one cares to look into life insurance until something happens, right? Until they get sick or they lose someone close to them. Then that bell kind of goes off in their head like, hey, maybe I should look into this. But it's one of those things, Mario, that you really have to look into before anything happens, especially when it comes to your health, because life insurance is not something that's really guaranteed. You can apply for it, but depending on the company, you're not guaranteed to get it. And if you have certain, illnesses going on with you right now, well, a lot of companies aren't really going to approve you because that's a risk that they're taking on, right? The way that they make money, obviously, is that they assess your risk on the likelihood of you passing away prematurely. And if it looks to them that you're not going to pass away anytime soon, well, then you're a great candidate because you're going to be paying premiums for a long time. But if you're someone who's been diagnosed with colon cancer or has, a lump in their breast, if they're a female, then there's a likelihood that, there could be cancer or something looming within you where they're not going to want to approve you. So you would not get life insurance. So life insurance really is for the healthy. I mean, there are still companies that will provide you coverage if you have health issues. So I don't want you to think you can't get coverage at all, but to get the best rates, it's definitely in your best interest to look into coverage while you're young, while you're healthy, and while, there's nothing going on with you. That could even be mental illness. It could be anything physical. You want to be clean as a whistle, for lack of better words, to get the best rates, right? So anyways, that's one incident. People don't pay attention to what's going on. They really tend to want to get coverage after something has happened. Number two, like I just to reiterate, is, the generational situation where, the parents didn't have it, so I don't need it. I don't need to get it. Or I don't have any dependents, so why do I need it? I don't have any kids. Well, think about it. Think about this question right now, listener. If you were to pass away tomorrow, who is that one person that's going to be paying for your funeral? Think about that. Is that your mom? Is that your dad? Is it your brother? Is it your spouse? And once you have that person in mind, do they have 25 or 30K, just lying around to pay for your final expenses? More often than not, that the answer is no. And then that's exactly where the whole crowdfunding and the GoFundMe comes into play, because people aren't prepared for you to pass away unexpectedly. So where are they supposed to find this money from, right? So once again, life insurance is just having something in place ahead of time. We all know our birth date. We do not know when we're leaving this earth. So therefore, no one can say, I'm going to live here forever, Nicole, or I'm going to be here till 99. Nobody can really confidently say that. So having a life insurance policy in place is a way to just mitigate that risk. And they're not using their last savings. They're not pulling from their retirement fund or from their TFSA that they've worked so hard to build to bury you, right? So you want to be proactive and you want to, not be selfish. Get something in place, right? Yeah. You think, okay, well, I'm not here, so I don't have to worry about it. Okay, but that's a real selfish way of thinking, right? Somebody has to pay for it. It's going to be paid for. So why should that person have to deplete their savings to pay for your funeral? You should, make that conscious decision to get something in place ahead of time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a good point. So definitely getting it early and planning early, extremely important for sure, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The earlier, the better. There's no such thing. And, I talk about this a lot with my clients and, on my Instagram account, life insurance for kids. I mean, a lot of people just think about life insurance for adults, but life insurance can be for kids as well. A few reasons just to reiterate why it's important to have it for children is A, the cost, right? Life insurance premiums are predominantly based on your age. So the younger you are, the less expensive it is. So if you get life insurance for your child, you're locking in a super cheap rate, number one. Number two, you're protecting their insurability. So that means that if you get life insurance while your child is healthy, no issues, if by chance your health does change down the road, you've essentially guaranteed and locked in coverage for them by getting coverage at a young age, right? So they could potentially get denied down the road due to this illness that came out of nowhere, but because you were proactive, got coverage ahead of time, they already have something in place, right? So it's definitely a great something to think about and a great way to also build wealth, because once again, if you have a whole life or universal life policy for your child, you can also create cash value while your child is growing up with this policy, and they can access this cash value when they're older for things like university, marriage, down payment, anything. So it's definitely something to think about to have for your children as well, not just adults.
Wow. Yeah. Great insights again.
Bet you didn't think about that one, huh?
I was going to say no, like the child insurance, like that never came to mind. And so once again, lots of learning, tons of value. And I know our listeners are finding value to this for this as well. So you touched on a little bit earlier as well, but in terms of trends, like just within the industry, when you think about life insurance, obviously the pandemic had a huge impact across the board with numerous industries. You shared that you noticed like one trend was like younger people are getting insurance, which is a great thing. Are there any other kind of trends that you've seen coming out of the pandemic or even now that you'd like to share as well?
Yeah, I think so that was just the biggest one, I would say, younger people, because once again, when I started, that was not the case at all. But number two, it's the wealth building. I think the pandemic, with a lot of us being home and having a lot of access to, of course, the internet and podcasts and social media and YouTube. So many young people took it upon themselves to become financially literate. I mean, everything from stock investing to, having their own TFSA and learning about what an RRSP is. So I feel that younger people are very in tune with trying to create a better wealth situation for their future self. And life insurance can do that as well. So I'm seeing that when people are contacting me, it's not so much because they want the death benefit. They know it's part of it, but they say, Nicole, how can I build wealth with this? What can I do? Or what is it going to cost me to ensure that I'm going to have this amount of money in 15 or 20 years? What can we put in place, or what strategy can we come up with so that, my dependents will have this amount of money, when they're older? So there's a lot more questions involved in how to use life insurance, not only as just the death benefit aspect, but as a living benefit. How can this policy be useful to me while I'm alive? What can I take from it? How can we build it up so that it's useful for my child or for myself if I want to, purchase a home or purchase, an investment property? How can I use my policy to help me do that? So those are some of the questions that I feel that people are asking nowadays, which is, totally different than I'd say 5 years ago. What else? So there is that. Obviously, COVID, had people focus a lot more on their mortality, just because with COVID, there was it didn't matter if you were young, old, if you caught that virus and, your immune system couldn't handle it, you unfortunately might have succumbed to that illness. So a lot of people, were gravitating to life insurance, period, just because they didn't know, right? They didn't know if they could contract this virus at any point in time. And it was important to them to make sure they had something in place. So I think COVID definitely helps people become aware that, hey, I may not just live till I'm 80 or 70 years old. I need to think about this stuff right now. So that also was another trend that I saw definitely within the past 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that goes back to the point on like just ensuring that you're thinking about it like long-term, looking to get life insurance early, because anything could happen, right? Exactly.
We don't know. And, just that school shooting, of course, that just happened, like earlier this week or whatnot, which is terribly sad, and you send your children to go to school and just assume and hope that you're going to see them at the end of the day, and they don't make it home due to an unforeseen incident like that, you just don't know. So once again, I'm just mentioning that in regards to the child insurance, like you just don't know. And children insurance too. Sorry, I want to make this is a point that I think people don't think about very often as well. They think a lot of people don't want to think about insurance for kids because they don't want to think about their child passing away. That's not a topic that they want to stay away from that. I totally get that as a mom of two myself. But it's not so much about final expenses either. When somebody passes away, more importantly, your child passes away, you got to think about how that's going to affect you, not just financially, but emotionally. Like,
Mhm.
would you be okay going back to work in 3 weeks? If your work gives you 3 weeks off or 6 weeks off, short-term disability or whatever the case may be to grieve, is that enough time? For most people, the answer is no. That is a devastating loss. But guess what?
Yeah.
Your bills still have to be paid. The mortgage still has to be paid. So when you have a life insurance benefit for your child, not only is it taking care of final expenses, but it allows you to grieve and take as much time as you want off so that you don't financially have to be thinking about heading back to work because, you have to pay for the roof over your head, right? So there's the
Mhm.
emotional aspect too of that peace of mind that you're not depending on your job giving you a small portion of time off. You can literally just take the time you need and know that the life insurance policy can take care of whatever it needs to take care of while you mourn the loss of your child. So that's just something I want people to think about as well.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great point. As I said earlier, this has definitely been an enlightening conversation for me personally. And I know for those listening, they've likely learned something new. But to round out our conversation today, when you look ahead for the remainder of this year, what's next for you and your business? And what's the best way for our listeners to reach out to you?
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, our business is steady growing. We don't stop when it comes to educating our clients. My siblings and I are very big. One thing, I didn't mention, Mario, as well, is we actually have a non-for-profit called Seeds for Success, where we teach youth financial literacy across the GTA. So we've gone into schools, and taught workshops about, money management, how to have a positive money mindset, teaching kids about investing, the stock market. So definitely that's something that we are continuously growing and trying to make an impact as much as we can. So definitely there's going to be a lot of focus there for the remainder of the year. But yeah, we're constantly just going to keep making sure that we're planting those seeds and letting people know that, what, even though you might not have come from money, you might not have come from, a rich family, or your parents didn't, create wealth for you, you can be that change, right? You can be that change for your own family. You can be the start of this new era of generational wealth. And that's not just with life insurance. That's with making sure that you're investing. That's with making sure that, of course, you're buying real estate. There's tons of things you can do to help grow your investment and financial portfolio. Life insurance is just one thing that I think that people need to have, in place. But definitely, you can reach out to our firm to learn about some more ideas and strategies to make sure that you're financially ready and that your future financial success is guaranteed. And yeah, you can reach out and learn more about us on our company website, which is www.cpnfinancial.com. And if you want some more life insurance content, please follow me on Instagram at Advisor on the Go. I have tons of content there that can, enlighten you a little bit more and share some tips on how you can apply for life insurance, what the process is like, and how it can benefit yourself and your family.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Like, I definitely agree. Like, life insurance is definitely a critical tool, like a part of your kind of broader wealth generation toolkit, right? So thank you, thank you, thank you. We really appreciate you being on our show today, Nicole. To our listeners, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Black Wealth Effect podcast. We'll catch you later. What was the one thing you heard today that inspires you to take action? Now plan to take that action in the next 24 hours. If you're looking for more support, ideas, or just want to connect with others like you taking action, join us in the Black Wealth Effect Facebook group. The link is in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time on the Black Wealth Effect podcast.